What's up, guys? In this episode, we talk with Jacob from Transform Solar. Transform Solar is a solar company that exists here in Florida. And Jacob actually shares a story of how he joined Transform Solar to ultimately revolutionize the solar industry and give it a much better positive impact in this community. Hope you enjoy. Hey, Jacob, thanks for joining our podcast today.
It's a pleasure, man.
All right, so you got to tell the audience what you do, man.
So I'm the general manager for Transform Solar. We're a local solar and electric contractor here in Tampa Bay, serving basically the entire Florida Gulf Coast on one of the fastest growing industries, which is solar energy.
How did you get into what you're doing right now?
I used to sell real estate, and through that, I was introduced to solar. Kind of hit me right away, like, what is this? This sounds too good to be true. Found out that it really was what it was framed to me as. And the product is not the problem. It was the people selling the product that became the issue for the industry.
Yeah. I was going to say, because actually when I first looked into solar and getting solar and all that, it was realtors who would probably say, like, we're the enemy of it more than anything else I experienced. This was back in 2018.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, talk to me about that. What do you mean it was the people selling it, not the product?
Yeah, so my introduction came in 2019, so probably shortly after you looked into it. It's 2025 now. Realtors are still not a huge fan of solar. It just creates extra hurdles for them through the real estate process. The homeowners that go solar don't always know what they're signing up for, right? So, if you deal with the wrong person, you could end up in a situation where, one, you're getting a solar energy system that doesn't meet your needs and isn't doing what's promised to you at that point of sale. And two, you're being overcharged. So I kind of see that as the double-headed beast of the industry. One, you're being charged way too much, way above what it actually costs. And two, the person selling you on it either doesn't know what they're doing, doesn't know how to properly size a system, or just knows what they're doing and is purposefully deceiving you. So when you have those two things, paying more than you should and not getting what you're promised, it ends up in a situation where you're tens of thousands of dollars in debt, taking out a loan that you may not even realize that you're taking out under your personal name, and then it's tied to your house, and come to find out that 3 years later when you try and sell, you have essentially what is a second mortgage on a house that you thought you were making a great decision for.
So talk to me. Let's talk about let's talk about that. But I want to talk about the product first.
Of course, yeah.
What should homeowners, like your typical residential home, anywhere between 2,000 square feet and 3,000 square feet, I'd say probably the most typical home. What should they expect from solar?
What they should expect is to be paying less for the solar than they currently pay for their electricity.
Okay, so you believe, or the way you kind of pitch it is like the amount of solar panels we're putting on will create enough energy to basically ground zero, I guess, of what it would be what you're paying for electric, but then what you're financing for the solar should be less than what you're paying per month.
Yeah, that's often the goal. We call that net zero, right? Where you're producing as much power on your roof or in your backyard as you need on an annual basis.
Okay.
That's not achievable for everybody. Some people use a ton of power.
Yeah.
Some people don't have a ton of roof space. Some people's homes are surrounded by trees. So every property truly is different. But ultimately, when it's all said and done, whatever level of energy you're getting from your personal power plant, let's call it, should be less costly than what you're already renting or purchasing from the utility company.
How is that not happening?
Kind of like what I explained, right? People that just aren't setting up a project properly. They're not sizing the system properly. They're not running the right model simulations on what that system's actually going to produce. And on top of that, they're trying to make a 5-figure commission and charging 30, 40, 50% more than what they actually should be for the product.
So I know a few things, but I want to have you explain to our audience, like what would be the problem? Like, how would they not get enough power for their home? Like, how would they make these mistakes?
Yeah, very simple. So, very few people, even myself before I got into this, we don't really understand how our houses use energy or what we're paying for that energy. If I told you to look at your electric bill and decipher that for me and tell me exactly what you're paying for and how much you're paying for your electricity, you can't really tell me, right? You pull up to a gas station, it's very clear what you're paying on any given day for a gallon of gas. It's right there on a big billboard. It's right there on the pump. You kind of know how many gallons your gas can take, and you kind of know how many miles you can get per gallon. Houses are different. The utility companies, they itemize the bill in ways that people don't fully understand. You don't really know how much electricity you're using on a monthly basis without looking at your bill. So I could easily walk into your house and say, hey, 10 solar panels, pay us $50,000 and this will take care of all of your energy needs. When in reality, those 10 solar panels are probably $10,000. and they're not actually going to provide all the energy that you need.
So basically, overcharging, not putting in, while also not putting enough on.
Yeah.
And you just explained my story.
Yeah, pretty much.
Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
So let me share my story real quick.
Okay.
And I won't name the company or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
They've already been bought out. So I was a pioneer, kind of doing this. Saw the credit, like, oh, you do all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So they said, yeah, you can get this many panels on. So I believe this many panels would cover this. Like, they were looking at my electric bill at the time. And it was like, oh, and during the winter months, I'm paying, $90-something. During the summer months, I'm paying $2 something.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So on the high end, I think the highest I was paying was like $270 at the time during the summer, $90 in the winter. They set me up. They got the solar panels up. And with the financing alone, 15 years, 3.99%, so good interest rate and all that jazz. Ultimately, I was paying $200 a month for that solar panels. And then I averaged $150 a month toward electricity. So I was paying $350 a month on average for my power. Now, that's in 2018. Has electricity gone up? Sure.
Mm-hmm.
But so now, I paid off the solar with a refinance, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But I now average about $210 a month in electricity with solar. So if I were to tell you my story, would you say that's a typical story or a bad story or a good story?
Unfortunately, a typical story. We don't run into that all too uncommonly, and that's probably the average person's experience, to be honest with you. And that's what kind of drove me to this industry, because it's people of all shapes and sizes, from all different backgrounds, all different financial tax brackets, let's call it, that end up in a situation like this. And what I noticed from the real estate perspective is that the people that get taken advantage the most often are the ones that are elderly and on a fixed income and trying to cut down that variable expense of their electricity with a fixed asset. Or on the other side, people that probably don't speak English all that well and don't fully understand what they're buying. And like I said, most people already don't understand their home's energy profile and what they're paying for electricity. So it's a product that I think sells itself, but unfortunately when a product sells itself, there's so much wiggle room for taking advantage of that at the expense of the end consumer.
So how would you have helped me in that situation? Be like, well, if knowing the numbers now, like, would you have been able to kind of help me catch that a little bit? Like, how do you try to be better than what they did in that situation?
Yeah. The easiest way to explain kind of our difference is our price. Right?
Sure.
We don't.
You are. I will say, for the audience to understand, I asked one of your guys. I said, "What would it be now?" This is a 2024. I asked him that. He said, "Well, the price of it now would have been a third cheaper than what I paid for it, and that was back in 2018."
Yeah.
So I probably would have been half the price of it with you guys. So I will say, yeah, you're right. You are more competitive.
So really starts with our price point. We look around and we find that we're 30 to 40% below all of the main competitors in the space. When you buy from a door-to-door salesperson, that's typically going to be a higher price product. And in some cases, I've literally dished out quotes where a customer gives me their quote. It's for $110,000 worth of solar. I run my quote and it's literally $55,000, half the price. Just did it for my neighbor a few months ago. He had a $60,000 quote. I got him the same system for $25,000.
Now, help us understand.
Yeah.
Just because it's less expensive, does that mean I'm cutting corners here? What is it?
No.
What is the difference?
Honestly, no. The difference is all of the people involved that are taking a piece of that pie. Right? So the salespeople in solar are so used to making a $8, $9, $10, $15, $20,000 commission. Before I knew any better, the first customer I had was brought by me but sold by somebody else that I considered a mentor at the time. His system was $43,000. And looking at the commission statement, the commission was $10,000. So almost a quarter of that cost was just to pay the salespeople. And coming from real estate, where I already felt like I was getting overpaid for the services I provided on real estate commissions, I looked at this and it just didn't sit right with me. I'm sitting there like, what did I do to earn? And I didn't get the whole thing. I got half. But what did we do, the two of us, to earn $10,000 off this? We're not up there in the attic wiring everything. We're not on the hot summer roof drilling holes and actually doing the physical labor. So what justifies the financial compensation that I'm bringing to this equation for the value that I'm bringing on the sales side? And that's where I really sat there and realized, that's the problem with this industry, is that it's being driven by people that are in it for the money, want to make a quick buck, get out and go do something else in 2 years.
And they're not supplying houses with the right amount of power to make it good
for
them.
Right. And that's the other side of the beast, right? Is that these people that are earning all this money, they're not even fully qualified. Like, they walk around with a fancy title. I'm a solar expert. I'm an energy advisor. But what have they done to actually educate themselves to be able to call themselves that? And frankly, it's not much. They learn a sales pitch. They learn a software that basically spits out a quick, easy quote where they don't have to really do anything. They trust somebody else's numbers and judgment. Then they walk into a house with a pre-scripted pitch that's very high pressure. Seems like a no-brainer. And then before you know it, this person bought something that they don't fully understand. In a lot of cases, they're promised a 24, 26, or 30% tax credit without fully understanding how that tax credit gets back to you. It's not just a check that the government cuts you.
Yeah.
Depends on your tax situation individually.
It took me 4 years to get my total payment.
Yeah, which is great. You had lower or a bigger refund for 4 years. Mm-hmm. But some people, especially the older people that I discussed prior, that are on a fixed income, that don't pay an income tax every year, that their tax liability is zero, they will never realize that benefit.
They'll never get that benefit.
Not unless they have a tax liability. That is a non-refundable tax credit, right? So it only offsets what your tax liability is. Right. If your tax liability is zero, then that credit is worthless to you.
Right.
And another industry-wide problem is that a lot of the financing mechanisms, the lenders in the industry that are dishing out these loans, a lot of times they're factoring that tax credit into the equation. So you'll sign up for solar thinking I have a $150 monthly payment, but what isn't fully explained is that that's contingent on you taking that 30% tax credit and paying it into the loan within a year and a half. Mm-hmm. So then let's say it's somebody that doesn't get that credit, or they're a 1099 worker and they don't pay an income tax and they don't get a refund check from the government. Then in 18 months, they don't have $10,000 laying around to pay down this loan.
That's exactly what happened to us.
And then their payment skyrockets. Mm-hmm. So there are all these little interminglings that kind of add up to this one nasty equation of solar is a scam. And truly it's not when it's done right, but I see why that perception is out there. And that perception is exactly why I got into the industry and why I've stayed for all these years.
So let's talk about that. Did you start Transform for Solar, or did you join Transform Solar?
So I was lucky enough to find Transform Solar.
Yeah.
I got into the industry and unfortunately was met with kind of the exact issue that I saw, which was people that were in it for the money.
Yeah.
Some companies that just felt like multi-level marketing schemes where I would sell a product with kind of a set package under one company name, which is really just a marketing and sales organization. And then day of install, some other company shows up, sometimes in branded vehicles that I've never seen before, sometimes in unmarked trucks, just random contractors that are subbed out to do the work. And then everything I promised is now being relied upon by somebody that I've never met before.
So you felt like your character, your brand was being destroyed because of the system you were in. So then you found Transform Solar. What made the difference?
What made the difference was, the people that started Transform Solar had the exact same values and perspective on the industry that I did. And I felt that right away. That's kind of what drew me in. And I was like, all right, I'll give these guys a chance. Never heard of them before. They had just gotten started at the time. But everything that they said seemed to align with what I had already thought. And then all it took was one job where the trucks that showed up were branded with the brand that I was familiar with. Met the guys on site. The owners were actually still involved in the actual install process back then. Got to meet the owners right there that were actually doing the work. And everything passed with flying colors. Smooth install, quick inspections, happy homeowner. And 4 years later, she's still happy.
I'm going to ask you kind of an awkward question here for a second. So you're saying like, hey, I was making money, sort of in a way I didn't like the way I was making money, but you almost like took a pay deduction, I guess, by going to Transform Solar, or is that what happened? Like, talk to me about that.
Yeah. So back then, as a commission-only salesperson, I basically set my own margins, right? Okay. So I got to determine on any given project, they give what's called a red line, which is their cost to actually install the project. And then I take that price, or any given salesperson takes that price, and then they mark it up however they see fit and whatever the customer will agree to. So if they say, hey, we'll build this project for you for $20,000, the average person would come in and say, okay, so they're building it for 20, I want 10, so I'm going to sell it for 30. And once I earned full control over that pricing process and I really got to go out on my own and make my own decisions, I was never the type to go and, build in 30-40% margin for myself.
So you were already kind of like at a lower commission, but based on what you're saying?
Kind of, yeah.
So that's why when you went to Transform, it wasn't like you took a big cut on your commission, because Transform Solar might pay a little bit less on their commissions so that they keep a more competitive thing for their customers, right?
Yeah, and it's not necessarily that they paid less, because I could have taken their red line at that time and marked it up, the same that I was seeing before. But from my first sale, which I didn't know what I didn't know at that time until, up until, today, I was never looking at any given project like, oh, I can't wait to make 5 figures off of this for having an hour or two conversation with a customer.
Sure.
And, real estate was the same way. I always, I was taught during my real estate days as a new agent, kind of figuring my way out, figuring out where my value lied in that industry was, I can't continue to do what I do without the customer, right? So that customer-centric perspective was very imprinted upon me in the real estate game. And I took that with me and brought it to the solar industry thinking nobody else is doing it. Why not me? And for the most part, it's worked out.
So ultimately, how does Transform Solar remain competitive without hurting quality?
I think running lean is a huge part of that, right? So the average...
You're careful on your overhead.
Right, exactly. Careful on overhead. That's basically the best way to sum it up. The average... nationwide solar behemoth, right? They have, just on the sales side, they have, a sales director, a sales manager. Then they kind of split the sale into 2 departments: the canvassing or the street team, the people that are actually going out and knocking on doors, setting appointments, and then the closing side. So when you have a sales director and the company, sales director, sales manager for both branches, then you have the manager for the people setting the appointments, the manager for the people closing the appointments, 2 salespeople on both sides, the setter and the closer. That's easily 4, 5, 6, 7 people that all want a chunk of every sale.
Yeah.
So it's not always one greedy person that wants a big cut.
Sure.
A lot of the times it's one greedy person at the bottom that wants a big cut, and then 4 or 5 mouths to feed above him, because they've all been involved on some managerial override type level.
Sure.
Where suddenly that project is now 50% more than what they would see from us.
So how does yours work?
We have 2 inside salespeople. We also work with a couple dealers, but we cap their commissions. And then we have a lean and mean admin staff. We have our own in-house crews to where we can pay them wages rather than subbing out the work and having that price fluctuation. Great relationships with suppliers that give us good prices. And ultimately a ideology that we're not going to get rich or retire off of any given job. We're going to make our success through the culmination of our entire book of business. And from the very beginning, we believe that word of mouth is the best way to find business. We don't have a big marketing budget. We don't have street teams. We don't knock on doors. We rarely and minimally pay for online ads or any form of advertising. So when you take out all of those marketing expenses from commissions to the actual payment for advertisements, what you get is a cheaper product, not because we're doing anything cheaper or using cheaper and worse equipment or using unqualified people, but because we control every aspect of the process and make sure that those aspects run clean and smooth throughout.
So in other words, you made a legitimate business.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because everybody else is not a legitimate business. That's just the reality.
A lot of them aren't. Yeah.
To me, they are. I think where solar went wrong was people created brands to sub out other brands, to actually sub out the one business.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which is usually the installer.
That's really it. Yeah.
So you're like, hey, how about we just have one business that has the sales team, has the marketing team, has the admin team, has the installers on, not that you can't have subs,
right?
But it's still strategically done like any good business would.
Exactly. Yeah. We treat it like a business, not a marketing agency that goes and sells a product that we actually don't have any
Because the
physical hand
reality is that everyone went there and inflated the price because it's like at the time that I bought, it was like, oh, you're going to get $9,000 back in tax credit, which we've already discussed how that was kind of a flawed system in that way. But so they don't mind charging $9,000 more. Whenever there's a credit, there seems to be more of an added cost.
Yeah, of course.
And so naturally, if anyone's looking at solar, I would like want them to talk to any salesman, but also you, just to see that difference.
Of course.
Because that's actually what happened to me. I met one of your guys in a networking group, and I literally had a very big distaste towards solar at that moment. And I was actually involved with having to replace my roof. I was also told when I bought solar, by the way, from this company, that they understand that sometimes when you have to replace your roof, you have to take off the solar, put it back on. They will handle it the first time. I was verbally told this. Now, being young at the younger at the time, I should have said, "Can I get that in writing?" And I didn't, and learned my lesson there, right?
Right.
And so here I am having to pay somebody, and they're telling me, and I finally found the company that would have to hire. I found the company that bought the company that I did it for, and all that jazz. Which that's fine, I guess. But then when they told me the price, I was like, "Geez, that's every." It was basically my credit. Anything I got back, now I had to give it right back to them within what, like 5-6 years.
Yeah.
Then I called your guy, and you're like, "We're like half the price, and this is how we do it, and here's how things should have gone." All of a sudden, I was like, "Hold on, let me have a conversation with you." Now you finally seem like a person, not this guy who's like, "Oh, it's not my circus, not my monkey anymore," because that's also how I was being treated. And I was like, "Oh, genuine, honest," and then the work being done really good, not messy at all. Like everything just made sense. And I was like, "Oh, okay." That's literally the only difference, is that Transform Solar is probably literally the only business in solar I know. Everyone else is just a sales guy who knows how to sub it out. And so how do you try to help Florida, your main target audience, understand that that's who you are?
I think it's through the relationships that we build, right? And we're very on the ground, person to person, direct conversation, right? We're not out there pumping thousands of dollars into ad campaigns saying, "Hey, look, trust us. This is why." That trust can only really be earned through the conversations that we have. And those conversations sometimes come from word of mouth. As we've grown and gotten more of an online presence just naturally, people are just finding us organically, which helps a ton. And then there's also the people that have, like you, gone solar in the past and either hate their original installer, don't know who their original installer is, or their original installer isn't around anymore. And we try to help those people too. After Hurricane Milton last year, we got a lot of calls, both from a few from our customers, but also a ton from customers of other companies that just had solar, saying, "Hey, hurricane came through, ripped a couple panels off my roof. Some got damaged, some didn't. Do you guys do panel replacement services, or can you help me get my system back up to where it was?" And, there's an argument to be made for, "Oh, look at this great new line of business. Let's profit as much as possible off of that." But we understand the impact of that. Nobody wants to go through that. Nobody's looking for a new product to buy. They have an existing product and they just want to restore it to the way it was. So we try to keep costs as low as possible. In every situation, we always just look out for the homeowner, and the way that we go about that is so genuine that people just feel that, much like you did when you met one of our guys in a networking group, right? We're not out here, trying to sell you on solar. I'm a big believer that if I have to sit in your house and convince you to put solar on your roof, I'll let somebody else do that. And when you're convinced, come back to us, and I guarantee we'll beat the price, we'll beat the quality, and we'll beat the overall customer experience.
Why should someone already be sold on solar, in your opinion?
Yeah. So you own a home, right? Why do you own a home?
Like versus renting, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, because ultimately it's growing in value.
Yeah, growing in value, right? So solar isn't necessarily on that train. It is a depreciating asset, whereas a home is an appreciating asset. But it's the concept of buying versus owning, right? And maybe this is my real estate background that drills this message into my brain. But why pay somebody else oftentimes more to help build value in their asset when I could pay less and grow equity in my own asset? And solar is the same exact concept. Why continue to deal with these rate hikes from the utility company? Why continue to not really know what I'm paying for? Why continue to let them dictate what I'm paying for my power when I could quite literally own my own power plant on my property for less than what I'm already paying them? And when you put it that way, it's like, why wouldn't I do this?
So, and I guess in the Florida way of saying it, though, you're generating power more so than owning the power in that situation, right? Because you have
both,
to be
right?
connected.
Yeah.
You're not off the grid.
You do have to be connected, yes.
Yeah.
That's correct. But,
but you're selling the energy back to them.
Yeah, you're using some
sense.
and then you're selling some.
Yeah.
Varies by
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah.
But, when in a traditional situation, you move into a house, you don't get to pick your utility provider here in Florida. It's just given to you.
Yeah, just a natural monopoly.
Yeah, and you just, whenever that bill comes, you either pay it or they shut your power off.
Mm-hmm.
There's a different world that exists now, which is our world, where you can, rather than paying for the service to have power delivered to your house, you can pay for the equipment to produce your own power at a lesser rate than what you would pay
And
for
just
that
use them for
service.
the supplement.
Right, exactly. Use them for the reliability of grid connection.
Yeah, yeah.
But ultimately, take the bulk of that expense, which is the power that you use, generate it at home. It's like eating out versus cooking your own dinner.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? I could go to a restaurant and pay, double what it would take to cook this meal at home.
Yeah.
But I'm paying for that service. I'm paying for that convenience. If I have the will to make it at home, I'll go cook dinner.
Is there ever a situation where solar might be a bad investment, such as like their location of the home, not getting enough energy, or they're not able to provide enough energy to pay for the power bill? Anything along those lines? What would you say about that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that it's very clear that not every home is a good candidate for solar.
Okay.
People that live in very shaded areas or have big trees around their house that don't get a lot of sunlight. Like I've run a ton of situations and scenarios where I have to go back and say, hey, look, this isn't going to work out financially for you. Are you doing this for the savings or are you doing this for another reason? Most people are doing it for the savings. And if that's the case, hey, hate to break it to you, but I'm going to be honest, I can't save you money with this.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I respect that a lot.
Yeah.
If any business that is like, it ain't worth it for you.
Yeah.
Automatically has integrity.
Right.
And I appreciate that. So now that we've established that you are the integrity, you are the solar company with integrity in Florida, you have the most competitive prices. How are you still the best kept secret? And what are we going to do about this?
I think that comes down to that marketing budget I talked about, right? In an effort to keep costs low, we still heavily rely on word of mouth, and it works great for us. But there's also a quality control aspect. We never, and before my time at the company, we've never wanted to be the biggest. Because when you grow in an unsustained way, you lose that control and that small company expertise and charm that you had before. So we want to grow smartly and organically. We don't just want to blow up and go get rich and then retire.
Sure.
That's not why we're in this.
Yeah.
At least not why I'm in this. And, my ownership group and my partners, they feel the same way. If we have to sell out to our current and future customers just to make a quick buck, then everything that we've told ourselves for the last 4 or 5 years has been a complete lie.
Yeah.
It's just not the way that we see things. And I think that comes down to morality, right? Like there are tons of ways to make money in this world. Not all of them are as ethical as others. And I would feel better about myself and sleep better at night knowing that every dollar that I make is ethical and done the right way rather than at the expense of somebody else.
How do you show integrity to a client or a prospect through marketing or ultimately sales before you show the price and do the work?
Yeah, I think that just comes with being authentic. Making sure that everybody that touches this customer's file is in it for the right reasons. And that's really the best way to do it. I could walk in with a pre-scripted sales pitch and make it seem like I'm in it for the right reasons and doing the right thing. But if it's not authentic, not everybody, but a lot of people can sniff that out. And I think just staying true to yourself and your value and staying anchored and grounded to that mission is probably the best way to do that. Because people
how
can
do you
feel
try
it.
to do that when you sit down with somebody? Or how do you maybe train someone to do that?
Yeah. Training somebody to do that is tough. The key for us is finding people that are in it for the same reasons as us. People that see solar as a vehicle to do good and follow whatever passion they might have versus a vehicle to just make a quick buck and go do something else.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's less about training people on that and finding people that are already aligned with that vision.
Mm-hmm.
For myself, really walking into any meeting with the demeanor and the attitude that, this person may very well say no. And if they do, that's okay. If they don't feel like it's right for them, I don't want to have to convince them of that. And then just leading with honest and factual information. Never telling them something. When somebody asks me a question, right, and I can feel the purpose behind that question, and knowing that if I answer it honestly, it may turn them off from the purchase decision, I would rather just give them the honest answer than not, just for the sake of the sale. So I think that sales desperation, and that's in any industry, right? People can tell when you're desperate for the sale, and I think letting that go and putting that to the side is a great way to kind of stay grounded to that mission.
Jacob, how can someone talk to you about maybe their house, commercial job, or whichever?
Yeah, transformsolarfl.com. Tons of information on the website, quick, easy buttons, contact form. Our phone number is published. If you call the phone, hit the extension for the sales line. Most of the time it comes right to me. If I'm not the one handling it, I'll pass it along to one of our trusted advisors. It's really easy to find us. Google Transform Solar, Tampa's most trusted solar company. You'll find all the information you need.
And you serve all of Florida, or maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less?
Most of Florida. We kind of draw the line at Gainesville,
Okay.
Gainesville South. We like to stay on the Gulf Coast.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, if you look at Tampa Bay area, greater Tampa Bay, and southward towards Naples, that's kind of our sweet spot.
Nice. Awesome. Jacob, thanks so much for your time, man.
Yeah, much
Really
appreciated. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, man.
Thanks.
Let's toast it.
Yep. Cheers.